Okay, I'll call the May 28th meeting of the Placer County Planning Commission to order. And our first order of business is a flag salute. So Jeffrey, could you lead us in the flag salute?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, second item on the agenda is the Planning Director report. Oh, roll call? Oh.
Mr. Stevenson?
Here.
Mr. Moss?
Here.
Mr. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Crabb?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here?
Mr. Brentenall? Absent. Mr. Denio? Absent.
Okay, well, thank you for the reminder. Now we'll have the Planning Director report.
Now
Screwed up my first time.
It's okay. It's a lot of pressure sitting in that chair.
Oh, yeah.
Not a whole lot to update the commission on. Things continue to be relatively quiet. We're not seeing a lot of new applications coming in. At the board's meeting on Tuesday, the board did adopt the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2009-2010. As I believe I discussed at your last meeting, revenues in the development areas continue to be down, and we are looking at reassigning about 20% of our staff right now to other departments where there continues to be a demand for work. So we try to be responsive to the ebbs and flows in our revenue stream right now, but the goal is to keep staff nearby so that at such time that development activity starts up again, we will have staff available to come back and work on those active projects. There will be a meeting on May 28th. We have a couple of items identified. There will be a subdivision map modification.
That's today, sir.
Oh, that is today's. I lose track of the days around here.
You're having such a good time.
There will be a meeting on June 11th.
Oh.
How does that sound? We have a couple of zoning text amendments that are coming forward. The zoning text amendment for snow removal will be coming forward finally. I believe your commission, there was a workshop several weeks ago, but this dates back to September of 2007 when you gave us direction to move forward with some action on a zoning text amendment for snow removal equipment up in the Tahoe area. So that will be finally coming forward for action.
Oh, for action, okay.
Oh, okay. On June 11th. And there will also be a zoning text amendment for density bonus. This is to provide additional opportunities for affordable housing projects, especially for those up in the Lake Tahoe area.
You had mentioned earlier that that would be a Tahoe meeting. Is that still the case?
And that will be a meeting up at Tahoe.
Okay.
We will send you out an email in the next couple of days letting you know times and locations. And for those of you that live down the hill here, we will be able to provide transportation up there if you would like to drive up together. It's a relatively short agenda, so we would see it being just a one-day meeting. But that will be at Tahoe in the North Shore area.
Does it look like we'll have a meeting on the 25th of June?
At this point in time, we do have a couple of items scheduled for June 25th. So yes, at this point we are anticipating a meeting that day.
When the board heard the budget thing, did they give this wonderful planning commission a raise?
No, I pushed for that. I tried to get your allocation increased, but we'll hold steady for the next year. Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, Michael, when you say that you're trying to move 20% of staff, how many people is that?
Throughout the agency, it's 28 staff members in planning, building, engineering, and at our counter staff. We have about 137 in the agency all totaled.
And how much luck are you having doing that?
Pardon me?
How much luck are you having doing that, moving those people?
We're having great luck. There are other departments where there is actually an increase in demand. The assessor's office continues to be understaffed right now as people come in to have their properties reevaluated. Health and Human Services, there's a real demand. As the economy wanes, the demand for their services increases. Facility Services has been trying to refill some vacancies that they've had for several years. So there are actually quite a few openings throughout the county where we can place these employees during this interim period.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, now on the agenda, we have an opportunity for public comment, and this is for any items that aren't already on the agenda. Is there anybody with public comment? Seeing none, it looks like we're close enough to 10:05 to go ahead with our first item, which is a road name change. Agatham Avenue in the Tahoe area.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Rebecca Tabor. I'm with the Engineering and Surveying Department. The item before you today is a road name change for a public road called Agatam Avenue. Current county policy and ordinance requires that the Planning Commission provide a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors for a public road name change. Agatam Avenue is located in the Tahoe Vista area. It's between National Avenue and Highway 267, and it intersects in two places on Highway 28. It's a looped roadway configuration. The lake is down to the south here. Here's an aerial. You can see the lake, this location, and Agatam does this. As background, last fall, the Tahoe Assessor's Office contacted the Engineering and Surveying Department and notified us that there were duplicate addresses along this roadway. ESD, Engineering and Surveying, researched the addresses and found that there were numerous duplicate addresses and that the numbering was non-sequential. We also contacted the emergency response providers and local fire agencies, and they were aware of this, and they also had concerns about delayed response times, 911 calls, just, there could be some confusion. So we decided to take some action for the safety of the residents along Agatam Avenue, also for emergency response and the convenience of these residents to initiate a road name change or renumbering. So we balloted all the residents along this roadway, and these ballots came back. The majority were in favor of a road name change as opposed to renumbering. So the proposal before you is to change the name of Agatam Avenue to split it roughly in half. West Agatam would be this portion. The intersection of Pinot Avenue would be the end. And then this portion would be East Agatam Avenue. It is roughly a split of, actually it's 3/10 of a mile each side. So really, in conclusion, this is per your staff report, staff recommends that the Planning Commission provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Supervisors to assign the names of East Agatam Avenue and West Agatam Avenue as shown on this exhibit and in the staff report. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have no questions. If there's no other questions by us, I'll move that we follow staff's recommendation.
Well, just a minute.
Oh, we got public comment, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so is there any comments from the public on this issue? Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Okay, I'll try again. I'll recommend that we follow staff's recommendation with the naming of East Agatam Avenue and West Agatam Avenue as shown on Exhibit A in lieu of just Agatam Avenue.
Second.
And that's a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. And we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Great job, Rebecca. You get all the hard ones.
Okay, well, the next item on the agenda, I see it's 10:10, so we can begin with this one, is a final map modification I think this is the one that Michael was referring to earlier. This is in the Alpine Meadows area. And so with this, we have Stacy Wydra. So go ahead, Stacy, and give us your staff report.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, fellow planning commissioners. The next item on your agenda is a subdivision map modification for the Rothbard residence, which is located in Alpine Meadows, Unit 11. The project site is located on the north side of Alpine Meadows Road off of Zers Court in the Alpine Meadows subdivision. This is just an aerial of where the actual location of the residence is. It's roughly in this area. The project site is zoned RS, which is single-family residential, 4 dwelling units per acre. And this parcel is unique in that, it's unique in the sense that, I'll just go off of this slide, that the court, these parcels, together with these parcels, all access off of Zers Court. However, lot number 64 accesses off of Juniper Mountain Road. The subdivision map for this particular project site does have many mapped setbacks on it. One being the 20-foot building setback, which is this line, which also encompasses public utility easements. In addition to that, which is not mapped but is a note on the map, which is the first page of the map, is this language, which indicates that there's an additional, or I should say a 30-foot setback, so measured from the property lines 30 feet back for a snow storage easement, of which this snow storage easement reserves the right for snow storage. However, there is a clause that says that the right to construct buildings which a valid building permit has been issued and which are more than 20 feet from the road right-of-way may be considered. So quickly to get you acquainted to the existing conditions, this is the existing residence, and I have some pictures that I will show you in a little bit. And this is the existing parking pad area of which the residents of the residence park. They currently extend into the traveled way of Zers Court, slightly, not by much, but it's just not as organized as a parking pad as one would probably prefer. So the applicants are requesting a garage addition, which is this proposed footprint here, with a new covered entry to access into the existing 792 square foot residence. The applicants, as of late yesterday, I received this new site plan, so it's slightly different than what you have received in your packet. However, the footprint that you see here has not changed at all. The only changes are to the driveway. Originally, the driveway had a slight curve cut out here. The Homeowners Association has had a number of meetings with the neighbors as well as the applicants, and they have requested that this be paved out further to allow for additional cars to be parked in front of the garage. The applicants have are proposing to adhere to their recommendations, and that's this design that you see here. Quickly, these are just the proposed floor plans. As you see, here is the garage. This stall length is 28 feet. This is 20 feet just to the stairwell. And then this width is roughly 22 feet, I think, or 24 feet. This is the proposed front elevation. It, too, has slightly been modified as a result of discussions that the applicants have had with the Bear Creek Homeowners Association as well as the neighbors. The only modification here is originally the roof was a pitched roof. The applicants have dropped the roof of the garage and have provided a flat roof together with this pop-out. This pop-out is required for that stairwell that you see here. It provides access from the interior of the residence down into the garage. So if one was parked in the garage, they can have interior access into the main residence as opposed to coming outside of the garage and going up the exterior stairs. And the engineer is also here who can also further explain details as it relates to this construction design. So quickly, these are just the elevations of the proposed construction together with the existing residence. These are all just the existing as-built. So quickly, I'm just going to get you acquainted with the residential neighborhood as it exists today. This is the first residence as you drive in to Zers Court on the left. And it is a corner lot, so this is the side of Zers Court as you're coming around. And as you can see, a lot of residences have two-car garages or a single-car garage, of which are located, some are located within that 30-foot setback as well today. This is the adjacent neighbor to the applicant's house. This is the adjacent residence to the neighbor's house, but this is, I'm just going through the court right now. And this is another neighbor. This is the neighbor that is directly down from the proposed addition of the residence, and this is where the garage is going to be proposed as it relates to this residence. This is the existing residence as it exists today, and as you see, there's a vehicle parked here trying to hug the existing stairwell so that it's not protruding out into the traveled way. It's important to note that the proposal that you have before you today is maintaining a 24-foot distance from the face of the proposed garage to the edge of traveled way, so that vehicles will not be protruding into that traveled way. And again, this is just pictures of the neighborhood. So the applicants are here today requesting that the Planning Commission approve the final map modification to modify the 30-foot building setback line on Lot 61 to allow for encroachment into that setback approximately 12 feet from the residential addition in order for the construction of a two-vehicle garage. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm available.
I have a question, Stacy. Of those adjacent property owners that you showed pictures of, how many of those had variances? Any of them or some of them?
Well, it's not a variance because it's a map modification. However, this residence right here is the only one that we have on record that actually went through the subdivision map modification. However, an engineer can speak further to this because he went out and took measurements. There are a number of garages intrusions within both the 20-foot setback as well as the 30-foot setback. And I believe over time, staff, because some of these parcels also qualify for what we call a slope exception. And if they have a steep slope greater than 20% across the building site area, they can encroach into that required setback through a building permit, provided that they, at a minimum, maintain 20 feet from the edge of traveled way to the face of the garage. So, and years ago, this map modification wasn't necessarily always caught or processed at the time. It was either over-the-counter building permit. And so this residence is the one that did receive a map modification, and that was back in 1998, of which they were approved.
And is that directly next door to the?
Yeah, there's a lot that actually accesses off of Juniper Mountain Road, which is in between these two residences.
Okay.
I can go back to that parcel map if you'd like.
Okay.
Stacy, how far are they going into the 20-foot setback?
They will be approximately 12 feet from the property line, so 18 feet into.
No, how far from the 20? That would be, what, 8 feet?
8 feet, yeah.
Okay, maybe one question for me too, just to, I guess, clarify, because I noticed there's a comment letter here that talks about encroachments on the side setbacks, but on the map, it looks like there are no encroachments on the side setbacks.
That is correct. The homeowners association has greater setbacks than the county does, and so the project complies with the side yard setbacks for the county's ordinance.
Thank you.
One last question, or two, perhaps. I'm assuming that this house was built before the 30-foot snow storage easement was put into effect?
That That's
Was it
actually
still
not
just
correct.
20?
The map that created the subdivision was actually, I'll tell you when it was. It was recorded back in 1972.
Right. Okay. So at that time, 20-foot was all that was required.
No, the 30-foot has always been on the map, but like I
30-foot
mentioned.
snow storage hasn't been on
Correct.
since then.
Correct. But like I mentioned, it was either not caught or, I'm really not sure. That was.
Any more questions from staff? Okay, thank you, Stacy. Okay, as the applicant in attendance, and please give us your name and address as you come to the mic.
Gentlemen, my name is Steve Walton. I'm a civil engineer on this project. I also have some of the pictures that Stacy of other projects in the neighborhood showing garages. It's the nature of this neighborhood. It's very steep on this hillside. Either they run into a downsloping lot or an upsloping lot, and I have pictures of, in my own measurements, of number. This is 16 garages on just the drive up there that are closer than 20 feet to edge of pavement. They're not even, the 30-foot hasn't been addressed.
Hey, probably, we want to go back to the mic, I think, so.
As well as this is the cul-de-sac. And, do you have any questions?
No.
Questions from the applicant? Want to take a moment to look at the slides?
Yeah, why don't we look at these and it would appear that most of the houses encroach.
I mean, they do. And the ones that don't have garages, so they were able to be back on the hill. So.
Okay, everybody get a chance to peruse as much as they want to?
Well, there's two sets of photographs that are a little different, I think. Yeah.
One set is of the street as you go up, and then there's another set showing just that cul-de-sac. And the same pictures actually that Stacy just showed.
In this case, just to refresh, you're going to be 24 feet from the face of the garage to the pavement?
Yes, on the one bay, or 24 feet from the furthest bay that direction. And I believe the arc comes in and we're 20, there we go.
Well, the 20-foot arc,
The 20-foot arc is here approximately. What this does is puts us, the BCPC asked us to add this portion of driveway, which made that portion quite a bit larger. Their concerns is make sure you park out of the cul-de-sac and out of the emergency vehicle access.
Okay, and that's the place where it's 24 feet right there?
I believe it's 24 plus, approximately 24 feet there.
Okay, so no other part of the garage is within, closer than 24 feet from the...
No, there's a plan on there. There's a 20-foot arc. On this corner here, we're approximately 20 feet from edge of what I measured as edge of pavement.
Okay,
It's a kind of a pavement abutting the driveway paving to the cul-de-sac paving.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, no other questions, thank you. And so now we'll open up for public comment, if there's any public that would like to address this. Okay, seeing none, then we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. So I'll ask you, fellows, what's your pleasure at this point?
Well, I'll move that we recommend to the board the staff report and approve the modifications in the final map for Alpine Meadows subdivision unit number 11.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
this does not have to be recommended to the board.
Okay,
Planning
I'll do
Commission.
that then.
So
You get to do it all by yourself. I'll second his motion if it's.
Okay,
I'd like to make a comment. I was somewhat concerned after reading some of the correspondence that we had this morning that maybe this was a little overdoing it. But then as you looked at the photographs and you saw the large number, almost all of the other property owners, those that had garages, were also intruding. And so it looks like it's a problem that's indicative of this subdivision more than the sense that we made rules and they're being broken, because I think what happens, I guess, from time to time, we try to do a really good job when you look at it on paper, and then when you get the steep terrain and you're working with it, it becomes impractical to adhere to all the rules, because it's just not possible, and so particularly in snow country. So for that reason, I'm willing to support the motion, but I am sympathetic to those people. You know, they bought in there. There were certain rules that we imposed at that time, and unfortunately, I was here at that time. But you also have to recognize that it was a vision that we probably all had, thinking we were going to do the right thing. But then, from a practical standpoint, you couldn't get there for most of those people. And I think that's the unfortunate part about it. So I'm sympathetic to the people. Thank you.
any other comments? Okay, well, just for clarification, we're approving the final map amendment or modification
Yes.
in this vote. And so I'll ask the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion to approve is carries.
I think these people that probably wrote letters have the right to appeal if they choose to. And maybe you want to give them their appeal rights.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, anybody wishing to appeal this decision of the Planning Commission has the right to do that. The fee is $495, and it has to be appealed within a 10 calendar day period. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Okay, let me see, are we
See you later, Steve.
on time?
Who's the handsome guy at the microphone? Holy Toledo.
Morning, members of the Commission. Lauren Clark with the Planning Department. I'm a little rusty at this. I'm not used to the interface with the PowerPoint, so this is great. This morning, I'm here to discuss something that you discussed 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, September of 2007. The Planning Commission considered a zoning text amendment that was prepared by Assistant Planning Director at that time, Melanie Heckel. The Commission deliberated at length for about 45 minutes to an hour and sent it back to staff to go back out into the community and take additional testimony, but also to bring back something more comprehensive. And that is really what we have today is your sort of first review. This is a workshop setting, not an action hearing, to take a look at what staff has brought forward at this time after much public discussion and much public debate, primarily through the Squaw Valley MAC and the North Tahoe Regional Advisory Council. So what we have before you today is draft language of an ordinance. It would create a new section of the zoning ordinance known as residential snow removal vehicle storage, a new section known as 17.56.235. The purpose of this ordinance is to deal with snow removal vehicle storage and some maintenance, not the operation of snow removal itself, in residential neighborhoods, for the most part above 5,000 feet in elevation. There was an ordinance that was presented to you in September of 2007 that primarily focused on home occupation standards, and I believe that's attachment A in the staff report. So it was a very minor amendment allowing people to run a home occupation style business, but it didn't regulate a number of the activities that would actually occur on the residential property, in order to provide standards about when these things should be allowed, shouldn't be allowed, and what level of discretion the county should have when we evaluate these. Because again, it's operating residential, not really commercial or industrial properties, where it is a permitted use already within the zoning code. The history on this largely is indicative of change. Snow removal has happened at the residential scale for probably decades in the Tahoe area, and it's largely without the county in any way directly regulating that particular activity. The county primarily plows the roads, the driveways, sort of the neighborhood scale removal is largely done by individuals, or it's done under commercial contracts with operators. Those operators, for the most part, do not have business licenses or use permits to operate those businesses legally. There's a small handful that probably has a business license because the equipment is very small and it can be tucked away inside of a garage, and it was considered incidental at that point in time. But because of the scale of some of the operators and their need for larger pieces of equipment and the amount of conflict that has emerged in the past 3 years, 4 years, primarily through code enforcement complaints, this issue has bubbled to the surface as needing some attention within the zoning ordinance, thus the September version and now this more recent version here in 2009. There is a section already on the books within the code that does allow an individual to store a commercial vehicle on residentially zoned properties regardless of that activity. So it's not linked to snow removal, and that is section 17.56250B1. If you have 10,000 square feet or larger, residentially zoned property, you have a garage, so you can actually park the vehicle inside the garage, and you have a minor use permit, you can store that heavy piece of equipment regardless of the nature of the operation. It's regulated through the minor use permit, so if we've got concerns about noise and maintenance activities and employees, we regulate that through the minor use permit. The key provision, though, is that you have to have 10,000 square feet and you have to have a garage. In many cases above 5,000 feet in elevation, parcels are smaller than 10,000 square feet, and in many cases, as you saw in the previous item, not everybody has a garage. So the parking of the vehicles and the storage of the vehicles and the use of those vehicles, in some cases more than one vehicle, runs in conflict with the current code. So there's been a lot of interaction with the community as to whether or not the current code, it works just fine, it's not broken, let's not fix it, versus this more comprehensive approach that we have within the standards that we've recommended. So we've come forward after thinking about this and thinking about the need to have vehicles in place, and that's really been the primary focus of the debate, is can vehicles be brought in from commercial or industrial locations for which there is not much above 5,000 feet in elevation, or should vehicles be allowed to be staged in place within the neighborhoods? We believe acknowledging that that is a sort of an important service within the community, particularly because it's a service that the county does not provide, that the zoning code needs to go beyond its current standard above the 10,000 square feet with a minor use permit with a garage, and allow these seasonally subject to a set of standards that we've recommended within this new section, and that's what you find in here. We've also recommended a couple of small tweaks to the Squaw Valley ordinance. Squaw Valley is unique in the sense that it has its own zoning ordinance. It works with Chapter 17 of the Placer County Code, the normal zoning ordinance, but it also has its own standalone ordinance, so there's also a little bit of overlap with the Squaw Valley ordinance as well. The primary standard, I'll back up one slide, is the second paragraph here, is that it's seasonal. So rather than allowing vehicles to be stored on property year-round, which is what you would normally find with commercial vehicle storage down the hill below 5,000 feet in elevation, this is the seasonal storage. So we're acknowledging the fact that these larger vehicles, heavier vehicles, will be on residential property from November 1 to April 30th. There's some provisions within the recommended language of the code that allows for some change to those standards if, in fact, there's snow events that are occurring in and around those dates. Generally speaking, this is above 5,000 feet in elevation, so it's not geographically explicit other than unincorporated area above 5,000 feet in elevation. There's a whole range of standards within the matrix that's attached to the code. Well, let me back up. The maximum size and horsepower standards, that came about after a lot of testimony and some research as to how large a vehicle can you fit inside of a standard residential garage. Typically about 7 feet in height, typically not a great deal more than 20 or 25 feet in depth. There's some commercial vehicles that will fit inside that space, others won't. When we've talked to both operators and people who own different types of pieces of equipment, we've largely arrived on a standard of 7 feet in height, 18 feet in length, 7 feet in width, with a maximum horsepower of 120 horsepower. We've explicitly excluded human-powered vehicles, two-wheeled vehicles, the sort of thing that a residential homeowner would have. Fuel storage limitations, we largely drew from existing code, whether it was the fire code, uniform fire code, other sections of Placer County code, we simply repeated that code. Standards for maintenance activities. So it's not just the static storage. We've also acknowledged that there's going to be some degree of maintenance on these properties. There's linkages to noise and the type of maintenance activities that are allowed. Standards for the generation of noise itself associated with vehicle startup and maintenance. There's language in here about idling, which comes out of county code. There's language in here about the amount of noise that can be generated and how close it can be generated to the property line. Certain exemptions for major storm events. So you may be able to exceed that seasonal standard if something is happening beyond those standards. You may be able to exceed even noise standards if certain conditions exist on the ground, and we've even tried to define what those storm events are, but using information from the National Weather Service. Residential occupancy standards, we're trying to make sure that in the end, these are still residences. In many cases in Tahoe, you may have a building that is unoccupied for a considerable period of time. Those are not to be staging areas for commercial vehicle, that these places of business are also places of residential occupancy. Outdoor storage limitations deals with the vehicle itself as well as accessories. In many cases, somebody might have a Bobcat or a similar type vehicle that they can attach different accessories on the front. Could be a bucket, could be a blower, could be any number of different things. A lot of that equipment is stored outside, so we have definitions on limitations for outdoor storage. Then we actually define some of these activities themselves, so the code interacts with other sections of the code. So when we talk about snow removal, it's defined. When we talk about snow removal equipment, we know what it is when we reference it within the primary code section. And then again, this comprehensive matrix of standards that really deals with a whole host of issues, but it focuses primarily on which zone districts allow this activity, how many vehicles are allowed within that zone district, what level of discretion is required, typically a minor use permit or an administrative review permit, the minimum lot area, how large is the parcel size, the off-street parking standard, and then storage setbacks themselves. Where we're at in the process is there's been a considerable amount of public outreach between county staff and the public, and again, primarily through the forum of the Squaw Valley MAC and the North Tahoe Regional Advisory Council. We had numerous meetings last summer. We terminated the discussion essentially once the snow season hit. So we really stopped the dialogue, I believe it was in October of last year, and we picked it up again this spring to the point that we brought forward to you this item this morning. We will be back at Squaw Valley MAC tonight for an action item. We will also be back to the Planning Commission at your Tahoe hearing on June 11th. We'll be at NITRAC for an action item also on June 11th. And then we hope to be at the Board of Supervisors for their quarterly public hearing in the Tahoe area on July 20th or July 21. So your discussion here today is really intended to be just workshop setting, hear from us, questions that you might have about this new version of the code, then obviously also to take testimony from the members of the public. At this point in time, what I would suggest is if you have any questions of staff, we would like to answer those. We would like to take information that you might share with us today as well as from the testimony, and if we're going to consider a revision, we would actually take that language, some of the potential for language change, to the Squaw Valley MAC tonight. So while we're not looking for any final action today and there is an environmental document we'll bring back to the Commission on June 11th, we are real interested if there's something about this in particular that you would like to see changed, and then we will carry that information up to the Squaw Valley MAC meeting this evening and share that with them. So that really concludes my formal presentation, formal remarks, and be open to any questions or comments you might have.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Question.
Larry.
Oh, I get to go ahead. I know of a few circumstances where, in fact, I'm sort of involved in one, where we're maintaining snow removal on a private street. How would storing of equipment in and on that area be affected by your proposal? Talmont's one, too, I know of, that has their own equipment, and they keep it within the subdivision.
The storage of that equipment, whatever it might be, if it's large enough that it meets the standard, larger than a two-wheeled or human-powered vehicle, so if it crosses over into the type of vehicle that we've defined, it can be allowed within a residential neighborhood as a matter of right in some cases, but more typically subject to an administrative review permit or minor use permit, depending on the parcel size. So the parcel size is really the linkage in terms of what you can and cannot do, and it really triggers all of the, and that's that large matrix, that triggers the various requirements. So they have something today. They're probably storing that equipment in a residential setting today. We, generally speaking, have no awareness of that activity because there's been no code enforcement complaint filed on that. Whether or not they're in compliance with the code or not, I simply have no knowledge. This would at least provide the ability, should there be a conflict in the future, for them to come into compliance if they're out of compliance today. It doesn't preclude the activity. It provides a different path of compliance than what's on the books today, which is you have to have that 10,000 square feet in your garage.
Well, the one operates in partnership with the county. I don't know whether you're aware of it or not, but the Talmont area, they do the primary snow removal with their road equipment, and then the county comes in some cases with the blower and cleans them up, and then they go back and do their own. So it's a partnership of sorts. So I don't know whether that would take any special acknowledgement or not, but
in the end, because it doesn't regulate the activity of snow removal, it's only when that vehicle is parked or maintained on residential property. So whatever's occurring on the streets, this doesn't regulate. It's when that vehicle comes back to its storage location and its location for maintenance does the ordinance kick in.
and it's acceptable to locate it on property that is owned, say, by the homeowners association or a quasi-government agency such as that.
Yeah, if it's a commercially zoned property, the ordinance isn't dealing with it, and these vehicles could be starting today on commercially zoned property, so this is really silent to any of that. More typically in Telmont, I'm sure it's residentially zoned property is where they're storing it, and it's simply taking place. We have no knowledge of those activities other than what's occurring on the street, you know, with the county crews as well. But in terms of a land use issue, it's simply, and that's probably true for the vast majority of the snow removal that's occurring out there. We had a total of 6 complaints filed, I believe, last winter. There might have been 8, 6 came into compliance, might be the number. The number I've heard is that there's something on the order of 40 operators out there from Serene Lakes on down into Martis Valley and the Tahoe Basin. So out of 40 who might be in business in some form or another, 6 or 8 came under the review of code enforcement last winter.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jeffrey?
Are we looking then to regulate only the people who are doing this commercially, or is this going to apply to the individual who owns his equipment purely for the clearing of his own property also?
Yeah, this looks at the storage and use of heavy equipment for snow removal as a land use activity, not as a business activity, simply as a land use activity.
Okay, so we're covering them both. Just a couple other questions. When we get into maximum size and horsepower, if it fits in the garage, do we really care about the rest?
You know, I actually had a much lower horsepower number than that once upon a time. Based upon some of the larger pieces of equipment, it's remarkable what hydraulics will do for you.
I understand that, but I mean, it just is a matter of how far you go and what, if it fits, do we really care?
No, it's a good question. Yeah, we based that particular standard on a very particular piece of equipment that is sort of on the marketplace today. It's a modern piece of equipment that some operators are buying. That is a larger standard than what I originally had, which was more based upon a Bobcat style chassis. The horsepower question, was linked back to how big can you get, and your comment is if we set the size standards,
It has to fit inside.
Doesn't matter.
I would suggest it probably doesn't matter, the horsepower, as long as it fits inside. The other question I would have, when it gets into the definition of snow removal equipment and the outdoor storage limitations, obviously this is going to carry over, like you say, a bobcat. Well, the bucket that you dig a pool with is the same bucket that you remove snow with, and I think we're going to be carrying over, if we're not careful, into a lot of other equipment or uses.
and the goal here is intentionally to ensure that these vehicles are removed when the snow season ends. Many operators will go into construction, excavation work for the balance of the season. When that occurs, you either meet that other standard of the code for year-round storage, 10,000 square feet with a garage, or you need to find an off-site commercial location, or the vehicles are at a job site. So our intention here is to have these vehicles leave the residential neighborhoods once the snow season ends.
And intentionally including into that regular construction equipment that could be defined later on as snow removal equipment.
Yes, yes.
Even if that's not what it's ever been
If
used.
people have incidental storage, I store my bucket in the garage, we're going to have no knowledge, no awareness of that. It's simply not going to matter. It's the vehicles themselves is what we're primarily concerned about.
My only other comment would be is we have a lot of conditions in here that you reference as being redundant to other county ordinances that already cover that. My concern is when we start re-putting those into new ordinances, that when you change one, now you have to change 6 kind of thing. My 2 cents worth would be to lose the redundancy. If it's already covered by another ordinance, don't beat it to death.
Yeah, we've been careful in working with council to ensure that what's in here doesn't replace, supersede, modify, change in some other way. It allows code enforcement and it allows the public to get full disclosure on what their standards are. It might be present in the code, but you wouldn't necessarily know the fuel storage limitations in some other section of the code. And the reason why they're here is because they were issues that were raised over and over and over again. Fueling of vehicles has been one of the many issues raised by the public. Oftentimes, there's the potential for the residential home to become effectively the gas station, for the vehicles to come back. And we want to ensure that we only allow as much fuel as is allowed in a residential area, which is actually very limited.
And again, I understand that, but if it's already regulated, my personal opinion is we don't need another ordinance covering what's already covered.
Any other comments from this side?
No, I'll wait for public.
Wait until we close.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Okay, well, at this time, I'll open it up for public comment. Is there any public comment? Okay, go ahead and step forward. Please give us your name and address.
Hi, my name's Chuck McDowell. I've been a homeowner in Alpine Meadows for 33 years. And like Lauren mentioned, we've been working on this issue for about 2 years. In the last 2 years, there have only been, Lauren says 6, code enforcement has told me 4. There have been other complaints against snowplow operators for things other than equipment storage, so I'm going to use my 4 complaints as the baseline. 2 are against chronic violators. This is out of the, I say 33. Lauren thinks that there's 40 maybe snowplow operators in the county. At the last report, code enforcement says there's only 1 operator that remains in non-compliance, just 1. There's no evidence that a snowplow operator has been put out of business as a result of complying with the existing ordinance. I'm not sure what we're trying to do here. Are we trying to make a model citizen out of 1 operator? Or are we attempting to open up the entire residential area for an influx of commercial vehicles for storage and maintenance? There's universal agreement that snowplow removal is essential. We just disagree on where it should be stored. As Lauren mentioned, the code already allows an operator to store 1 piece of equipment on his property. He knew that when he started his business. The assertion that there are no nearby commercial properties available, or nearby commercial properties, is false. There are a score of properties in Squaw Valley. There's 11 in Alpine Meadows, numerous at Soda Springs. That's only a mile and a half from Serene Lakes. There's many around the north and the west shore. Operators themselves have also stated in print and on TV that there are commercial properties available. They don't want to use them for convenience reasons. I invite you to look up the business licenses. They show non-residential areas for storage. When notices of violations are sent out, operators find non-residential areas for storage. There's only one right now that remains in non-compliance. How much more evidence do we need? It's been said that many nearby commercial properties do not allow storage of snow removal equipment and are not zoned for large pieces. So what are we going to do? Dump these all into residential areas? I don't think so. It's also been said that the code should be changed because the operators, some of them don't technically comply. They don't have business licenses. They don't have land use permits. But that's like saying, let's change the existing leash laws to let dogs run in packs, or change the residential speed limit to 50 miles an hour, because technically nobody complies with those either. Simple math tells me that none of this adds up. None of this warrants a change to the existing code to allow more equipment storage in residential areas. Enforcement of the existing ordinance is a complaint-driven process. It provides neighbors protection against egregious offenders. Minor transgressions are and have been tolerated by homeowners, especially during periods of heavy snowfall. However, significant violations should be treated appropriately. In closing, I have two suggestions. One is abandon this ZTA as unnecessary. There have been 16 versions of the ZTA to date. 2 Planning Commission meetings, including this one, and 6 Advisory Council meetings, and in all that time, no one has come out of hiding to show a need for this. It's convenience, certainly a convenience factor, but no one has shown a need for this change to the existing code. The second recommendation is, if necessary, modify the commercial zoning to allow snowplow equipment to be stored there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, come forward, sir.
Good morning. My name is Cliff Busby. I own Castle Peak Snow Removal. I started it in 1997. I have about 200 driveways I clean. I have a business license, and before I started my business, I talked to the county to ask about what requirements were necessary for this business. I live in Serene Lakes full-time. There's about 850 houses in Serene Lakes, and of those 850, there's about 60 that are occupied full-time. The rest are second homeowners and vacation houses. I've attended the Squaw Valley and the North Tahoe Max. I think I understand what the problems are over there. I appreciate the time that Lauren and his team have put in, and he's taken the time to talk to me about some questions I have about this proposed ordinance. I don't claim to understand everything that's going on over in Squaw and Alpine, so I'll address myself today only to Serene Lakes because I think I do understand that area. The complaints that the county has received from snow removal operations in the Serene Lakes areas are not from homeowners. They're only from one competitor who lives in Nevada County, businesses in Nevada County, doesn't pay any taxes in Placer County. And the reason why I know that's who complained is because he came by the front of my house and was taking pictures of my equipment in my house, and I'm going, when did he become an appraiser? What's he taking pictures of my house for? I talked to some of my other competitors that operate in Serene Lakes. There's a total of 5 of us. He came by their houses and took pictures and with their equipment out. And a few weeks later, we got letters from the county. So that's why I know it's another competitor. What I'd like to see here is, if the county's going to try to solve this problem, I'd like to see an ordinance that we could all live with, and not that's going to put the snow removal of people out of business. It's not going to harm the homeowners in our area who want snow removal. Last year in Serene Lakes, we received 380 inches of snowfall. It's over 35 feet. Our conditions are different than other places in Placer County that receive snow, and the reason why they're different is if those of us who do snow removal in Serene Lakes don't get to those people's driveway, they're not getting out unless they want to spend an hour shoveling through the berm. It's one thing in other parts of the county where there's less snow and people can drive out and go to work or get to the ski hills, and sometime during the day the snow removal service comes to clear the driveway so that it doesn't turn to ice. But in our subdivision, the berms will be this high on a regular basis in the morning. You're not going to drive through that. You have to shovel it yourself. Our subdivision is a pretty old subdivision. There are very few, if any, lots that are 10,000 square feet. Mine's 8,000. A lot across the street from me is 5,000. There's very few garages in Serene Lakes because historically you used to park on the street. You'd park on the right-hand side in the morning, the county would clean. The left-hand side in the morning, you'd move your car, the county would clean the other side. What I would urge, if the county is going to adopt this ordinance, that there be a modification to deal with the particular circumstances in our subdivision. I would urge 2 sentences that say above 6,800 feet in elevation, ARP is required, not an MUP, and that equipment may be stored outside. There's precedence for this, and Lauren can explain this later, where there were snow tunnels in our, that were only okayed in our subdivision to be put up before winter and taken down after winter, back when you parked on the street. The county at that time realized that there are particular circumstances that are unique to Serene. I would ask for the same thing here. The reason why I asked for an ARP as opposed to an MUP, ARP, it's in Lauren's information, costs about $600 versus about $2,000 for the MUP. Every year I have different drivers. I have a total of 4 drivers each year. One driver's driven for me for several years. It's no big deal. I've had drivers that last one storm and they never come back again. If I have to do an MUP for each driver, it's going to be onerous financially. I have no problem with the county wanting to regulate this. I have no problem with the county wanting to know where I have all my machines. Just make it something that we can live with so that, you know, we don't have to, you know, pass these costs on to the homeowner for no particular reason. The ARP is going to allow the county to know what they want to know, that I'm there, fill out the paperwork, and keep up to date, but it's not going to run me out of business if I have 2 drivers quit after the first storm and then I have to get more ARPs signed. There's also no property. There's no commercial property in Serene Lakes. I'd also like to give you a couple photos. The dates are on them so that you can see what the situation is in Serene Lakes. If we store these things outside, nobody can see them after about Christmas anyway. This is a February picture. Here's some that are January, and you can see down the street that nobody's going to be able to see this equipment if it's stored outside. Can I answer any questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone else from the public that wants to comment?
Yes, I would like to comment, and I'd like to pass these out to the members of the commission. First of all, thank you for giving your time to serve on this commission. And I'd like to thank also the county staff that has been very helpful in responding to my requests. Let me say first, I come from a place where there's a lot of snow. It really snows. I represent the Serene Lakes Property Owners Association on Donner Summit. We have about 600 member families of about 800 houses in our community. I'm the president, and I've been on the summit for more than 30 years. I also sit on our local water board, and I'm involved in various summit activities, so I have a good idea of what people on the summit think. We're very interested in snow blowers in Serene Lakes and their storage, and we'd like to address the proposed ordinance. We'd like to compliment you first on most of it and suggest just a couple of changes that would be important to the summit in our community.
Very
First,
briefly,
let me stipulate, though, I'm not involved with snowblower companies, snowblower equipment, except for the small red one that I drive around or push behind on my driveway. I do have a few friends who are snowblower operators, however. Almost 30 years ago, the county banned on-street parking in Serene Lakes during the winter, and that was fine, but it did change the neighborhood. Driveways were graded and paved, and garages were built. New styles of houses were designed and constructed. And to show you how things have changed, when I built my first garage in 1985, I came to this board for a variance so that I could build the garage. It was one of the first garages in Serene Lakes. My neighbor complained, saying that Serene Lakes was not the kind of place for garages. Well, the board let me build, and now there are garages all over the place. Off-street parking did something else, though, too. It started a new business opportunity, clearing driveways, and that's not just because we're lazy, although some of us are. If you have never been on the summit during a snowstorm, you have no real idea of what snow is like. I laugh when I read that some town is closed down because they got 6 inches of snow. We can get 6 feet out of one storm. Take a look at this chart here. This is from the Central Sierra Snow Lab. Talks about the maximum minimum amount of snow that we've had over the last period of time. We get serious snow in Serene Lakes. An average is somewhere around 35 feet of snow a year. That's way more than any other place in the county. In fact, Donner Summit has the most snowfall of any residential area in the continental United States. We need slightly different solutions to problems. Now, the county does a marvelous job of clearing the roads, but when they clear the roads, they leave these big berms of Sierra cement, as Mr. Busby illustrated for you, and they are packed hard with snow. They're very hard to get through if you're trying to get out. Even driving my 11-horsepower Honda up to it, it doesn't just chew through it. I've got to back up and go at it a number of times. Time is a factor, too, in terms of snow removal. It is a chore. It's a big chore. But what about when you're going to work, or when you're coming home from work and you have to clear the berm, or when you have an emergency, or when you're going out shopping? We need the snow blowers stored locally. If we have them stored off-site, the snowblower operator has to clear the berm, go out and clear another berm where the snowblower is stored, park in the street while he clears the berm, drive the snowblower out, come back to Serene Lakes. Yeah, it's only 1.5 miles away from Soda Springs, that's true, but the snowblower operator has to use a lot of physical labor in order to get to the snowblower. If they're stored locally, and we want them stored locally, the snowblower operator is going to be able to provide a lot better service. Your proposed ordinance would allow locally stored snowblowers, and that's good. It also allows for local maintenance, and that's good. It has restrictions on fuel storage and equipment size, and we like that too. There are noise regulations, and those are good. And we like the occupied dwelling rule and the limits on major maintenance. But we'd like to talk about a couple of other things too, because we have a unique area. We have a lot of snow. The ordinance also says that for local storage, lots have to be a half an acre in size, and if they're not going to be put in a garage, or that fences have to be put up, and that the snow blowers can't be stored more than 20 feet closer to an adjacent dwelling. Well, first of all, the dozens of snow blowers on Donner Summit are small. They wake us up when they come into the driveways early in the morning, but we're quite thankful that they do, because then we can get out. And they make that beeping noise as they back up and go forward, and we accept that too. Most of the lots in Serene Lakes are less than what you're talking about here. Most of the lots in Serene Lakes are somewhere around 6,000 or 7,000 square feet. So we wouldn't be able to store any snow blowers on any of those lots. And you're talking about putting up fences. This is a picture of, I gave you a copy of it, I'll share that with the audience too, of my first house in Serene Lakes. And you can see that the fence gets buried, would get buried. There are no fences in Serene Lakes, but the fence would get buried after the first couple of storms, and that any snowblower trying to park in that driveway is going to be hidden from view. Many of the drivers who operate blowers in Serene Lakes change from year to year. Who's going to invest thousands of dollars and aggravation to go to a hearing if the employee is going to last only a season or two? We were afraid that the requirements are so onerous that we're going to lose service or the prices will rise. We have no complaints in Serene Lakes about stored snowblowers. Everyone knows they're needed, and everybody wants them available in the driveways so that they can clear people's houses. We suggest just a couple of small changes, that above 68 100 feet, when we're talking about small machines, that only the administrative review permits be required to store the machines during the winter outside without fences, and that the machines can be stored more closely than 20 feet to the adjacent dwellings. Now, the first response is, well, we can't make exceptions like that. But we already do. We've got bear boxes above 5,000 feet. We've got snow tunnel ordinance in Serene Lakes. It is unenforced, but it's there. We applaud your efforts and your consideration regarding the equipment of snow storage equipment. But the people of Serene Lakes would be very happy if you just make a couple of small changes. And if you ever want to experience real snow and real snow clearing, feel free to come up during any one of the moderate storms, and I'll be happy to hand you a snow shovel, and you can get the Serene Lakes experience, and probably be happy that you don't live there. So, any questions for me?
Okay, thank you, sir.
Could we get your name for the record?
What?
Your name for the record.
I'm sorry, I forgot that. Bill Odegeest.
Thank you.
And like I said, I'm president of our association.
Okay, do we have anybody else that wants to make public comment? Okay, come forward.
That's that Highway 40 guy.
Good morning, folks. My name is Norm Saylor, probably the oldest snowplower on Donner Summit. Been doing it for roughly 55 years up there. We've gone through this thing a number of times, and as the one gentleman stated, I think it really comes down to the point to where what are we trying to do again? You know, here we have a problem that is not controlled by us, but controlled by nature. It tells us it's going to snow. We don't know positively for sure it's going to. We have to be prepared to take care of it. It's not just us two. It's the people, like the name that was mentioned, Talmont, Nitsquaw, and Alpine. It is a problem. But again, we're going back to where have the complaints been? How many have there been? Very, very few when we take into consideration how many homes are serviced by people like myself, the gentlemen that are here, that yes, we are in business. It's a tough business. How many of you guys would like to get up like we have to at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, find a machine, go out and dig it out, which is the best way to do it. Parking them inside a lot of times just doesn't work, because then we have to park the cars that are inside out in the driveway. So then we're going to have to try and get the machine out of the garage to get past the cars that are in the driveway. So it's a major problem. Serene Lakes alone, as was stated by the other gentleman, we get a ton of snow. We're not sure when the county is going to get there. We just don't know. But the little putt-putts, as I call them, those guys get up. My drivers are mostly retired. They want something to do. They got to get out of the house. They love going out and plowing this snow. But if they had to drive where I park my machines all summer long at Donner Ski Ranch and had to drive, they wouldn't do it because they'd have to go out and shovel this berm that the county has put in front of them, so they don't want to bother with it. They're going to wait maybe until the county might come by and get the berm. We've created a situation on Donner Summit that is hard on us, the snowplow drivers. We have a vicious amount of people. They have to get their little darlings to the ski resort. They would not be able to do it if we didn't take care of what the county did, and that was berm them in. That's not the county's fault. They do a great job in Serene Lakes. They really do. I respect those guys. I've known most of them from way, way back. So I look at it to sit down and say very simply, we don't need another great big giant ordinance. We have not been confronted with enough to create this. So I recommend that we just kind of let the sleeping dog lie and go along with that. And if we get tons and tons of complaints into the near future, then we really need to look at it. But right now, what are we trying to do? We're taking a lot of time. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else from the public that wishes to speak? Okay, come forward.
My name is Shirley Ellis, and I'm speaking on behalf of my son, Todd Brownell, who does snow removal in Alpine Meadows. And I need to echo the sentiments of these people. We in Alpine Meadows have the same snow issues and need to have the equipment available to us to be able to do the job. And the larger loaders are the equipment that needs to get out, where this ordinance is addressing it to the smaller equipment. When you're in the higher elevations, like Serene Lakes, Donner Summit, Telemont, Squaw Valley, you need the larger equipment. We know because we do have 2 smaller pieces, and the one larger is the piece of equipment that does the major portion of the job. And staging that or having it in the valley is essential, and having the backup equipment nearby is also essential. And understanding what the weather is and the way the weatherman predicts it, you don't know if you're going to get a storm or not, and having to store it in Truckee or Kings Beach. They say there are 11 commercial lots in Alpine Meadows. There may be. I have not found them. I have personally contacted many of the areas to define place for us to store it, but they are not willing to because they don't want the liability. They don't. They say they're in Forest Service, and yes, they may house other people's equipment, like our competitors. And the people that are complaining about us are using an operator who stores his equipment in his front yard, not legally. I mean, the law's the law, so why don't we all have to follow it? And getting a minor use permit is like $2,000 or $3,000 plus the variance. And when you have someone across the street complaining about you, and we're hoping that the law would be changed so that we can comply. We probably have been out of compliance, and so have many others, but most of the time we have made a great deal of effort to be in compliance, and we do store our equipment in another location, which has been approved by the county, but it can't not be there on a full-time basis. So what I am asking is you to consider it. I appreciate the efforts of Lauren and the people here, and many of you, a couple of you, live in areas where you really understand what it is. But our equipment needs to be available for them. And I understand there is one company that has gone out of business because of the harassment, and they got rid of their 200 clients. And this is going to be happening to more people if we don't try to work together. And, when there's a major storm event, you cannot, it's not practical to trailer a tractor on a lowboy or take the chains off. I don't know if you ever thought of putting chains on and off that weigh over 200 pounds per tire that is 4 feet in diameter or larger. It's just not an easy thing to do. And if you've got weather that's coming in, I wouldn't want to do it in a storm myself. So I think there's been a lot of thought and a lot of things put into this, and I appreciate your hearing me. I'm very nervous in doing this because I've had a lot of harassment, including being on National Channel 3 News for this, and threats against my financial ability and my son. And this is not comfortable. I'm fearful in being up here, and I hope I don't get repercussions from it.
I just have one question.
Yes.
You talked about a large piece of equipment.
Yes.
And you have read the ordinance. Does that piece of equipment fit the size and horsepower limits?
It's under the horsepower, does not fit the size. And most of the equipment that is in our valley, we have 3 people. Each one of them has 3 pieces of equipment. Our 2 competitors of 6 pieces of equipment are all loaders that are 11 or 12 feet in height, none of which are in garages, yet they're in our valley. There's 17 pieces of equipment, 15 that are large loaders and 2 that are small. The 2 smaller ones would fit in a garage, but they don't. They're backup equipment, and they don't cut it for doing the job in Alpine Meadows at our elevation.
And so with the ordinance that we're talking about here, then you would still have to move some of your equipment to a commercial site?
Yes.
Okay.
And I have yet to find, and have made attempts to find places in Alpine Meadows where we could do it. Alpine Springs County Water District is county property, but they refuse to allow us to do it because they don't want the liability.
Okay. I guess what I'm a little bit confused about, you said that you support the wording in ordinance that Lauren has brought forward?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I support his efforts in trying to find something. I do not. And also, operators have the need, if they have one piece staged on their property, they're allowed to come and go only once. So where do they go to use the facilities or get food or take a rest while they wait for the county to come around? If they're out at 2 o'clock in the morning and the county hasn't come around by 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, they need to take some downtime. But if they're not allowed to come in and out of the property to go to the bathroom or have some food or take a rest, where can they go? Do they truck their tractors to Truckee and wait? No. And if a lowboy is needed to haul this large equipment, that's $250 each way. And there's 9 vehicles that are in the valley right now, or during the winter, that are used. And there's, these people say that we're going to see sites with 68 pieces of equipment on residential lots. That's never been, and it's alluding to scare tactics to make other people fear. We've made attempts to comply as best we can. We've got no acknowledgement for that. And yet we're in a situation between a rock and a hard spot as far as trying to comply.
Okay. Okay, is there any other questions?
Any other questions?
Go ahead.
No, I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding as to what's going to fit in a garage and what isn't. I think there's only one basic type, the new blowers that everybody has now that are going to come close to fitting in someone's garage. And so I think the bulk of the equipment is going to be stored outside no matter what. I think we need to grasp that issue because it's just not conceivable that that everybody's going to have those same little blowers. And the reason is they're only usable for snow removal. And then 9/10 of the year you got to park them. And so you've got what, $85,000 or $90,000 for one of those sitting year round. You can't use it for anything else. It has no other use. Whereas if you have loaders and backhoes and so forth, you can use those for snow removal, but you can also use them the rest of the year for construction or other things. And so I think the reality of it is the best solution is the snow season parking, and then they have to move them to some other location for the off season. I think what's happening in some cases, at least my involvement tells me, that a lot of guys are leaving their equipment parked in their driveways year round, and that's causing an additional irritant. And so if we could convince them to take that equipment and park it someplace elsewhere, you don't not only not see it, but it's not an eyesore. I think a lot of the resistance might go away. And I think because you're not going to get rid of the loaders and the backhoes and the other snow removal equipment because it's really the most cost-effective way for a guy that's year-round operator. If you've got unless you're, in Serene Lakes and maybe Alpine and some of those places, but in most of the other areas, you got to have one whale of a big operation in order to justify letting a piece of equipment sit year-round, And so I think we have to realize that there's going to be loaders and backhoes and those kinds of equipment sitting there if we approve this, and I think the best thing we can do is be sure that people move it back to some other location out of sight for the summer months so that they don't have those people ragging on them all summer too.
All right, Larry, I want to say that the way the equipment reads now, the one piece of equipment may be stored in the driveway during major storm events. And when it's not a major storm event, it has to be removed from the valley. And that's what I feel is not possible, and you can't count on the weather person to tell you when you need to bring it back. You bring it back, we get 2 inches of snow. We don't get a weather report, we get 6 feet, and then you're trying to scramble to get that equipment from Truckee or Kings Beach or Tahoe City if you are lucky enough to find a place to park it, and how do you get it there over the roads?
Well, I think the hard part is the chain issue, because the chains are so big and heavy and so expensive. I mean, I think the last pair I bought was $3,500 or something for a loader. You don't want to be driving them around anywhere on dry pavement because you're just wearing them out, and it's expensive. And you can't take them off and on. They are miserable to put on and off all the time. So I'm a little sympathetic to the having to move it during the winter months, but I think if we created a window of, I think you said November 1st to is
April
somewhat
30th.
reasonable.
That is reasonable to deal with. If we could keep it in the valley, we cannot build a garage on our property or anywhere in Alpine Meadows that would fit that piece of equipment in it. And as they said, fences are ridiculous to do. And probably after January, when it parks next to our house, you cannot see it from the road or the neighbors. Anyway, it has a natural snow fence. So we'd like to be in compliance. We'd like to work with the people to make this happen. And I just don't want any more harassment, such as the people in Squaw Valley have had from this person who attacked her husband and with a deadly weapon. And that person has also threatened me, but yet these people here, my neighbors, work with him to put on television shows and harass us, as well as other things that have been going on. So I don't think this is the way to go as neighbors. We have a great community and a great area that we all appreciate.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments from the public?
Hi, my name is Pauline McDowell. I live in Alpine Meadows, and I kind of feel like I've been a little bit personally attacked just a moment ago, and I would like to say that I differ greatly with a lot of what was said by the previous speaker. We have not done any harassment. We did not call any television people. They called us, I guess because of these meetings that we have been publicly speaking to. I would like to say that if the county is determined to pursue this new ZTA, that this one is much closer to being fair to both the homeowner and the operator, as long as nothing in it changes. The purpose statement was protect the residential character. 2, minimize visibility. 3, limit dispersal. I am concerned that if the size of the plow is increased, which was you've been petitioned to do, and the size of the lot is decreased, that this would allow any commercial operator to store their equipment on any friend or neighbor's property and trade for free plow service. And that has been freely admitted to in both the newspaper and verbally at other meetings. This contradicts all the purposes of the statement, particularly number 3, by dispersing commercial equipment all over residential areas. Some don't want screening, but looking out at an equipment yard is not beautiful. I can tell you that firsthand. 3 tractors, spare rotaries, spare blades, maintenance going on. It's said that they're little blowers the size of a Jeep or an SUV, not big, ugly, yellow machines, and that they're fairly quiet. This isn't true. Last winter, a large rotary started up at 7:30 in the morning. It pulled out a little after 9 a.m. 90 minutes of warm-up time is not compatible with residential living. There's a big difference between somebody coming in and blowing your driveway and leaving than having 2 or 3 tractors warming up till their hydraulics are ready to move out. Perhaps it is time to suggest something that was put forth to this committee 2 years ago, that an operator and any paid driver be allowed to stage 1 tractor outside, regardless of the size, when a weather storm warning is issued. We all know that with today's technology that this is done hours and sometimes days before a storm comes in. There are no surprise storms that prevent an operator from reaching his equipment. In fact, This helps the employee because then he doesn't have to drive from his home to the owner's home. He can stage it in his own driveway. Then, remove the equipment 48 hours at the end of the event. This allows time for cleanup of berms, slush, and the widening of the driveways. The equipment can be returned to a commercial area, and the neighborhoods can go back to a residential alpine setting. There's no screening, no fence, no plows sitting there for months, weeks. Look at this past January. We didn't have snow from the end of December until almost, middle of February? It goes back to an alpine setting, and everyone wins. We've had one operator, at least in Alpine, who's done this successfully for years. And the two operators in Alpine that are successful, both are grandfathered, and I tried to find their homes one time, and I had to drive by 3 times before I could find one tractor in one of their driveways, and the other one I never did see anything and had to look him up in the phone book. So, they're doing it successfully somehow. But most importantly, one thing. We've heard the complaint that there is no commercial storage, that they also have restrictions. But I think it's time maybe for the county to be putting their energy into broadening the scope of commercial storage. It seems more sense. It seems more appropriate than moving them into our neighborhoods. But most importantly for you to consider is that the present system, in conjunction with code enforcement, works. Whether we decide whether it's 33 or 40 operators, there were only 4 complaints in 2 years. I agree with it. Don't ask, don't tell, like a fellow back here said. If it's not bothering somebody, if somebody's not being an egregious offender, then nobody complains. People are reasonable. We've had a home in Alpine for more than half my life, and nobody complained until the last 7 years. Somehow, when forced to, these people miraculously can and do find non-residential places to store their equipment. Every single one of them, because we looked, had a place on their business license that was other than their home address. Okay? Yes, it's been going on for years, and it will continue as long as abuses exist. Ruining our neighborhoods should not be a solution to this problem. All the time and money that has gone into this issue, it's complaint-driven. Small transgressions are overlooked. But when a homeowner has finally been abused enough, it is time to do something, and that is not to change it so that it becomes worse. I have a couple of other things that I would like to, that weren't prepared, but I feel compelled that I have to say. I, too, have a written statement that there was land available for storing plow equipment, but they have not been approached. Okay? And I also have some pictures that I would like to show of attempts to hide, if I may. I'm sorry, I wasn't going to bring those up, but I feel like a rebuttal is necessary. Thank you.
Okay, I have one question.
Sure, I'd be glad.
Just, clarify my mind. You were talking about three vehicles, and at least in my reading of the proposed ordinance, it doesn't appear that there's any real place, other than the commercial, that they could store 3 vehicles. It would be limited in most of the zoning to 1. Is that your interpretation?
I guess I'm not clear what you're saying.
Well, there's a proposed zoning text that we heard from staff.
They're allowed 1 in their garage, plus 1 either outside fenced or screened, or in their garage. So that would be a total of 2.
So it's your interpretation that the proposed ordinance would allow 2 vehicles?
Yes, yes. 1 screened, 1 garaged, but I think I'm having the biggest problem with the fact of some people wanted to change the size. You know, anything over 7 feet is a commercial vehicle, and they're big, they're obtrusive, and it's not why we all moved there. We all bought our homes with due diligence, that it wasn't a mixed neighborhood, it was purely residential. And we've got our investment there, too. I mean, sure, they've paid a lot for their tractors, but we've bought our homes. Okay.
So when you're referring to the 3 vehicles, you're referring to violators of the current county policy?
Oh, yeah, well, that's what we look at.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Chairman Johnson, just
Yeah.
clarification in terms of the vehicles. It's a variable standard that is indexed to parcel size. In the majority of cases, it's 1 vehicle, and there's either a screened requirement or a garage storage requirement. There is a section, provision number 11, and I'll read it briefly into the record. When there is a local, state, or federally declared emergency, or the National Weather Service declares that there is a winter storm warning or a winter storm emergency, is in effect 1 vehicle more than the maximum allowed in that matrix may be stored on a driveway during that storm event. So it's 1 vehicle. In some cases, it is 2 if you have a very large parcel, typically greater than a half an acre. So you can temporarily store a vehicle on a driveway when we have that sort of declared event, which is defined elsewhere within the code section. So you can get to 2, and in some rare circumstances, you could actually get to 3, but only 3 if you have greater than 20,000 square feet.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That clarifies it for me. Let me see, is there any more public comment? Anybody else that wishes to speak? Okay, well, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time, and we're not going to be making any motions or decisions today, but this is a time for the commission here to discuss, and anybody on the commission that wishes to bring up a point of change, this would be the time to bring that up for discussion.
Well, I just have a request of Lauren that I think might be helpful in future deliberation, and that is, I think it would be good to know for a winter season how many times a person sends out equipment to actually go out and plow. I know pretty much what we do in our area, but I'm sure it's different in different areas, so it would give you an idea of how many days that piece of equipment actually gets started and does something. I think there's a lot of time when it never turns a wheel, and I think that would be helpful to understand how much.
In that same vein, I'd like to also request, is there a way to find out how much clearing by large equipment is done on commercial property versus residential?
I'm going to make a plea.
That's about all you can do.
Which is to the operators who've heard your requests, because quite frankly, that information to a large extent will need to come from them to the extent that they're willing to provide me that information. Otherwise, I'll go to the county sort of fleet operations and get an understanding as to how many snow removal days does the county have. But those private sector activities, I really needed to come from the private sector, and to the extent people are willing to provide that,
well, we can
I'd be happy to report it out.
Okay.
I think there was one discussion, too, that it was a little bit off, I thought. They talked about when the county comes through and they got to cut the berm out, and that's true. But the county also comes back again later, 8 hours later, 2 days later, whatever, and pushes back again, because they'll push back just the width of a plow going this way and one going that way, so you've got 2 lanes of traffic. But then they'll come back again in some other time and push back another 3 or 4 feet on each side, just so that they stack the snow up as high as they can, and then they can bring a blower in if they want to. But the point I'm saying is the county comes through more than once. And so it may be necessary for these people to go out, get the people bailed out initially, and then go back around the second or third time and cut berms over and over again. I know we do that a lot. We have to go back over and over again to cut the berms the second and third time because the county keeps pushing it back and fills them in. So there is a lot of that, and that causes an additional workload to the system. And that's all I'm just trying to have everybody understand how it works.
I guess one area that I'm still a little bit puzzled about is, I can visualize the small equipment, and apparently this ordinance is developed to handle the small equipment, but then I'm hearing about the front end loaders that are 12 foot high, which in effect are probably very useful pieces of equipment in the wintertime, but we're still going to require them to go back to commercial areas.
No, I don't think so.
All pieces of equipment associated with the storage of snow removal equipment would need to find seasonal storage outside of the residential property, as long as it met the definition of snow removal equipment, which is anything not human-powered and not two wheels. So whether it was small or large, very large, it would still, during the spring and summer, need to find an alternative location. If a person wanted to store it year-round, then they have to meet that other criteria, 10,000 square feet in a garage.
Okay. And so like the 12-foot high front end loader with the 4-foot wheels, so now that can be left on?
As this is currently drafted, you could only get to a large piece of equipment like that that wouldn't fit inside of a garage when in the matrix you have outdoor storage allowed. So you'd have to go to this matrix, and what you find is, for example, in residential zone districts of 10,000 to 20,000 square feet, the vehicle is screened. We removed the fencing requirement. We made it a screening requirement. So screening can be vegetation, it could be structural, it could be a fence, but you can have that piece of equipment stored outside. Similarly with 20,000 square feet and above. It's off-street parking is required, not screening or garage. The one area where it runs in conflict, though, and maybe this is an area that we could bring back to the commission, is maybe once you get to that larger standard where it's simply allowed outside, we have less of a concern about the size of the vehicle. Because right now, the vehicle restriction is no matter where you park it, indoors, outdoors, screened, not screened, it can be a maximum size. So maybe the intent here is the smaller vehicles on the smaller parcels, larger vehicles on larger parcels. It doesn't reconcile the issue of 5,000 square foot lot, I've got a front loader, and it's 11 feet tall. That isn't addressed here, and we haven't recommended that to the commission. Obviously, we would look to the commission if that's a change.
So you're saying like if you have a 20,000 square foot lot, you could park that big piece of equipment?
It starts at 10,000. At 10,000 square feet is where you don't have to have a garage. As long as the vehicle is screened, and that may not always work for somebody, but if it is screened, you can park it outside.
And that's year-round?
No.
Only seasonal. All of this is always seasonally.
Okay, well, it seems like that makes sense to me. It at least gives a few more options for the folks that have larger equipment. And I surely agree that that if you got a piece of equipment that you use year-round, granted in the summertime it would be following the other ordinance requirements, that seems to make economic sense for a person to go ahead and use that piece of equipment in the wintertime, and also very helpful for the neighborhood. So I think that answers the question, Larry, that you were bringing up. Are there any other questions or comments that you can think through?
Well, the one comment I have is that as effectual as it might sound to don't look, don't tell, I don't think we're at a point where we can do that now. I think we've got to pretty much follow this through and either amend or vote to keep, but I don't think we can just sort of ignore it. Even if it's complaint-driven, then complaints will probably go up, so I think we got to deal with it.
Anything else?
No, we'll raise these issues to Squaw Valley MAC this evening, particularly the suggested language on the size restriction. Just quickly looking back through my notes, also the issue related to horsepower, whether or not that can just simply be deleted. If we have a maximum dimensional limitation, do we need the horsepower limitation?
Cut the exhaust pipe off.
And I think that's it, at least in terms of the commission's request for change.
Okay, is that? Okay, well, with that, thank you, folks. We appreciate you coming down and giving us your comments. And so it sounds like we'll have more opportunities tonight, and we'll be up in Tahoe in a couple weeks, and we'll be hearing the ordinance for a recommendation. So thank you, and I'll close the meeting with that.
Just for the benefit of folks here, June 11th, we expect to be a Tahoe hearing, probably in Keats Beach at the North Tahoe Center there. So it'll be a daytime hearing on June 11th, probably in the morning.